On the Road is a road trip novel slash bromance by Jack Kerouac, with lots of like jazz, bop, boys in love, bebop, scat, bop, bibbity, hoop, drugs, and jazz. And drugs. You know, drugs and jazz and snaps and two men in love with each other and coffee and Bob Dylan. Not Bob Dylan yet, too early, but you know, like Allen Ginsberg and drugs and jazz and like love between men. You get it. The novel takes place over the course of 5 parts, and there are 2 main characters. The narrator, Sal, who's hot and into jazz and bop and drugs and men and women, but also one man, and his friend Dean, who's hot and into jazz and bop and drugs and men and women, a lot of women, but he like kind of also likes this one man. It's a bromance, you'll get it. Here we go. Part 1. Sal goes to San Francisco and meets Dean. Then he goes to Denver in 1947 and meets Dean again, and they go to a bunch of like 60s jazz bop drug parties. And then he goes back to San Francisco and gets a job as a night watchman at a boarding camp for sailors. And he's pretty bad at it because he desperately wants to get laid. I mean, he says, "Oh, where is the girl I love?" But he means, "I need to get my D wet." So he meets a girl named Terry on the bus to LA, and they kind of date for a while, but it can't work out because they're from 2 very different worlds. Terry is from Mexico, and she and her family work in the cotton fields in Sabinal, and he's kind of like a punk 60s beatnik kid who doesn't know the meaning of real work and is the type of guy that I would probably date. Part 2. It's 1948. It's Christmas. Sal and Dean are back together, and there's more beatnik 60s drug stuff going on. But now there's this new girl character named Mary Lou who Dean brings to the party and who Sal doesn't want to have sex with. But Dean kind of wants him to have sex with her, which is weird because they're sort of dating. And then they all go over to New Orleans and have drug romps there. And then they go back to San Francisco and have drug romps there. And Dean is womanizing, and so Mary Lou leaves. And then they all go to listen to jazz music and bop and bebop and jazz and drugs. Part 3. Sal goes from New York to Denver. He's depressed because, of course, he's depressed. He goes to find Dean, who's womanizing like crazy and having lots of parties, and Sal has this moment where he's like, wait, is Dean kind of an egotistical asshole? And then he's like, yes, but I need him, and I love him. And it's like every woman has had this thought before Sal. Like, we get it. But okay. They all listen to jazz some more, and they do some more drugs, and you totally get the picture by now. Like, they're fighting with each other sort of passive-aggressively, but they love each other. And then Dean is this crazy, reckless driver. They're on a road trip, and they have lots of jazz, drugs, bop, jazz, snap, scat, drug, adult misadventures. You get it. You should also know that Dean is impregnating a bunch of ladies in this part. Like, there are women getting pregnant because of this man's penis mongering. I don't think it's called that in the book, but that's what it is. Part 4. It's 1950 and Dean is starting to get kind of boring. He settled down now and he basically just looks at erotic playing cards. Which, I mean, we can admit, erotic playing cards, pretty exciting. But it's not enough for Sal, so Sal leaves Dean and he takes the bus to Washington, Ashland, Cincinnati, St. Louis, and Denver. And he meets this guy named Stan, and they go to Mexico City. And I guess, like, Dean gets sort of bromance jealous and buys a car to go meet them in Mexico City, and they just have, like, the best time. It is super easy to get weed there. There's this huge party in Mexico. They get a bunch of hookers. It's, like, the best time. They are all, like, so in love with each other. They are men, and it's so great. And then Sal gets dysentery, and Dean is all, peace, see you later, because Dean is kind of a horrible human being. Like, we all knew that, but Sal is blinded by his obvious love for Dean. Who knows why he loves him, really? Love is a mysterious bird. It's sort of like jazz music in that way. You see what I did there? Part 5. So, okay. Dean goes to New York to get married. And then he leaves that girl to get back with another girl, Camille. She's like the main girl in the story. Then Sal meets a girl, Laura, and falls in love with her and moves to San Francisco with her. And then he and Dean, Brokeback Mountain style, are sort of writing a bunch of letters to each other. And eventually Dean comes to visit Sal and is like maybe gonna move there, but there are lots of misunderstandings and money isn't working out the right way and things are not the same. And so eventually Sal and his new GF go to a Duke Ellington concert without Dean, and the bromance is kind of over at that point. But Sal is depressed about it because he's the kind of guy that I would probably date. The end.